Is technology a demon that's here to kind of possess us and take us over and take away and kind of trick us with this monkey paw idea? Or is it a daemon in a way that it's here to help elevate and assist us? How can we take metaphysical forces in the thesis that if everything is everything and we're all spirit into form, how do we use it as a tool, not a weapon?
Welcome to the GRACED podcast, a space for everyday magic for your everyday life. We do this through rituals, aligning yourself to your soul's purpose, and creating alchemy to heal our mind, body, and spirits so that you can bring in more love and joy, manifest your desires, and believe in your dreams. Listen and watch over at graceduong.com/podcast and on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, and all the places you can find me on social media. Now let's dive in to today's episode.
Welcome to the GRACED podcast, a space where we talk about everyday magic for your everyday life. Today's guests are Jennifer Sodini and Grant Yoshino, the co-creators behind the Artist Decoded Tarot deck, a deck that blends AI-generated art, fine art, philosophy, and esoteric wisdom. And even though the art was AI-generated, Yoshino passed the information along to me that it did take him a year to create this art of using certain prompts, going back and forth with the AI, and also drawing over the AI-generated art to create what you see in the deck today. Today, we're talking about themes of the World Tarot card, which represents wholeness, unity, and completion. We explore themes of the world, modern technologies like AI and how that's affecting spirituality, how you can use it for your practice, and so much more. And we are doing a giveaway of the Artist Decoded Tarot deck on Instagram, YouTube, and all the socials, so make sure to check that out. More information on the @grace.duong channel, the @Mystic Mondays channel, and on the Instagram posts. Before we dive into this episode, I want to share with you a special announcement, because since we're at the World Tarot card episode, this does conclude the tarot card series of the Major Arcana tarot cards. I may bring this back at a later time, but I do feel a call and a need to transform the GRACED podcast into a new format, which will primarily be on YouTube, but can still be accessible on your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So similar to what we're doing today, but just in a different format. I want to express the deepest gratitude for you guys for sticking with me the past couple of years, creating these tarot card episodes, oracle card episodes, and all of the episodes in between now and then. It has truly meant so much to me, and I'm especially grateful for you to witness the transformation of this podcast into a new format as well. As today we'll be talking about the World Tarot card, it does feel like a full circle moment and a sense of completion for this podcast to transform into a new avenue. What that avenue is still unfolding for me, but I'm glad for you to be here and to witness it all. Thank you for growing with me, for evolving with me, and for your presence. It goes beyond words for how grateful I am that you are here. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this episode featuring the World Tarot card. Hi, Jennifer and Yoshino. Thanks so much for being on the GRACED podcast. I have your deck, the Artist Decoded Tarot, with me, and today we're talking about themes of the World Tarot card. So I'd love for you both to introduce yourselves, your backgrounds, and how you two came to collaborate on the Artist Decoded Tarot deck.
My name is Jennifer Sodini. I am an artist, writer, creative human being. I entered the deck space with my first deck, a Mentee Oracle, and I have a few other decks that have come out since. And yeah, I kind of known for this irreverent reverence for everything mystical and ineffable. And I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, I started messing around with these artificial intelligence programs in, I believe it was the summer of 2022, if I'm remembering correctly. And then I remember specifically when I started experimenting with it, and basically the way that the deck is iterated is through using the images through various prompts and stuff, and then basically cutting it up with Photoshop and then painting over them. And then, so it's a bit of a different process than just like spitting the card directly out or spitting the image directly out. And so basically I started experimenting with that. And then I immediately called Jenn because she was the first person that popped up, and she has been creating these decks and stuff, and it just made sense. And Jenn and I have been friends for quite a few years now. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of the shorthand of how this deck came to be. We learned a lot through this process. We learned a lot about each other. I think we learned a lot of the use of artificial intelligence in general. And I think that it informed us in a lot of ways. It definitely informed me on the process.
Yeah. So, what inspired you to use generative AI as a part of your process? And I'm curious about what prompts you are also using to decipher this world that you've created through the art. Because when I look through the images, there's a sense of timelessness that I'm getting through the artwork. There's like multi-dimensional things happening. There's like paint splatters. There's so many different things happening in the artwork. And I actually didn't know it was generated by AI until I read the back of the deck. I feel like there's a humanness to it, which is probably parts of what you did after generating the art. But I'm curious, what was that process like? Where did that inspiration come from?
One of my friends that is a listener of my podcast, he told me about using Midjourney and using DALL-E and these various programs. And I was like, I have no idea what that is. And then so, I think for me, everything starts off with a bit of a curiosity for things. And so I started investigating and I was like, wow, this is very interesting. And this was pre the conversation of how, like where the images were being sourced and all of that. And so essentially I like to experiment with all sorts of different mediums. I've used like 3D printing but my various mediums that come about, video, and my main medium is photography, actually. So I started experimenting with it, and it's been an interesting process, to say the least.
I'd like to speak to how, for me at least, when Yoshino came to me with the project, it was still, like he mentioned, the Wild West AI. Summer of 2022, the novelty of all of it was just at the forefront of like a lot of our consciousness, right? Wow, we can see what this looks like by generating a few words. And for me, the AI conversation has kind of been a part of my life since 2010. A former partner back then was warning about it and encryption and cryptocurrency and all of these things that were going to be coming into our reality in the foreseeable future. In the summer of 2014, I attended this conference. It was called the World Series on Technological Unemployment, where there were the early conversations about what the world is going to be like when AI advances to a level that humans are irreplaceable. And Yoshino, as a working artist and somebody that's literally built a career and platform around elevating art, coming to me with this idea. I mean, I'm a big thinker. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a Trojan horse into discussing the limitlessness of human imagination and what it really means to be a creative and what it means to be an artist and how we can dive into the well of the human record and see what it means to be human through technology. And again, speaking to Yoshino's point, this is before we knew where things were being sourced from anything, all the ethical implications that have evolved since this conversation. For me, the idea of it being this Trojan horse into creativity felt like something that could be not only like prescient, but a relic. And we even look at it now. I mean, it looks archaic compared to what AI is virtually indistinguishable from reality. And that's where I think looking at Yoshino as a working artist whose medium is to literally see the world through a camera, the main medium, right? And for me as a creative being that's interested in spirituality and the fine line between like, where does technology end and we begin? I thought it would be a great way to kind of just discuss the journey of the soul with tarot as the medium and then incorporating prompts that literally are encouraging like analog creativity. So that's my big why.
Yeah, there are a few things coming up for me. So there was a recent New York Times article speaking about how AI had taken over some creative jobs. And in this case, you guys used AI to empower yourselves, I suppose, to create the artwork. And one of the other things that's coming up for me is I went to an event where Deepak Chopra was showcasing his AI that he had created. So it's kind of like Chat GPT, but with Deepak answering your questions about anything that you'd want an answer to. And so I'm wondering for you guys, what the bridge is between art and technology, plus adding the human element or removing the human elements, or even what technology and spirituality can create using AI.
I think for me, Yoshino and I are both very clear in the beginning that we didn't want this to be the AI deck, right? That wasn't our core thesis. That wasn't what we wanted to be known as. That's why we were very transparent in that generative AI was used, but there was human intervention. There was human intervention through Yoshino digitally painting and creating a whole world. And AI is not symmetrical, especially back in 2022. So to create symmetry and cohesion was actually like a very daunting task. And for me, it was just kind of like tarot, these cards that are the blueprint of the soul into form. How can we see technology to further either expand upon, verify, validate what it means, like to even have a soul?
I don't know. I think a big part of my process in general of just kind of going about life is experimentation with different things, you know? And I think what I learned through the process is how do I say it? I think what I've learned through the process is like what I think is ethical in terms of the use of artificial intelligence in like one's process. And also, I mean, I like, for instance, like I've been finding it really interesting, like using, how do I say it? Like how Photoshop, for instance, has like the generative fill. And I mean, it's like really, it's quite interesting by being able to, well, because my process or my main medium is photography, to be able to like remove background elements and things like that. That's something I've been experimenting with recently. But yeah.
Yeah, so I find it interesting that you, Jennifer, had mentioned this depiction of this collection of the human experience or the soul. And it reminds me of the Akashic records, which I feel like I do get that sense of like a keeper of time when I'm looking through the artwork. And so it's interesting because humans make mistakes in remembering things and collecting memories, but in some ways, so does tech. But tech does a better job at it because it's just like keeping data, I suppose. And bringing it back to the world, which is the tarot card that we're here to talk about today, the world can represent finishing a cycle, achievement, and completion. And at the time of this recording, we are in a 9 numerology year, which is a hermit tarot card year, tying up loose ends before we enter a number 1 numerology year, which is about new beginnings. And I do feel like this is really relevant to what's going on right now because there is the rise of AI and people are concerned about what that could look like for their daily lives or even their occupations and how they can thrive using AI versus being afraid of it. So with this collective shift that's happening, whether we welcome in this technology or not, how are you incorporating that into your lives on an individual level? And how did you feel about using it on a collaborative level? Or where do you see that going, using it with others?
Yoshino and I have a mutual friend named Sarah Zucker, who is an incredible artist. And her work rolls around kind of like this bridging of like archaic and modern technology through like VHS. But she had this great quote about how it's the witch, not the wand. So I think really the idea is how you use it and the intentionality behind it. Like AI is not a substitute for human creativity. And especially now that ChatGPT and all these things have been around long enough. I mean, I can almost immediately tell when something is just purely prompted. But if it's used intentionally, like to help elevate or edit or condense, I think there are ways that we can learn to collaborate with it instead of allow it to kind of like collapse our own sense of identity and self. And even I found if you use it enough for editing, you see like, well, I actually like my version better. You can't replicate pain and suffering to the degree that like the human experience can. There's a lot of charge around what it'll mean for the advancement of AI, but it's not going away. It's not. It's only going to get further integrated into our lives.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the thing with editing, like you're talking about too, is running, maybe you have a poem or maybe you have like a chapter to a book or something and running it through AI, it spits it out in a way that is more authentic to not you necessarily as a person, but to the whatever program you're running it through, right? Like it has its own specific voice. So I find it more interesting actually with like writing and stuff to make mistakes. I mean, I think like there's something interesting in like keeping the mistakes in the voice or using specific words that, I mean, there's specific words I think that these artificial intelligence programs, for instance, like ChatGPT, they continually reuse. I mean, Jen and I have talked about this before. Like, what are some of the words? Do you remember off the top of your head? Like there's
tapestry.
Yeah, tapestry. That's the one. That's the one that's like tapestry. They use that all the time. And there's certain things that almost dehumanizes it in a way. So I guess the idea there, it's like, how do you rehumanize it in a way, right? And then I think that is more interesting in terms of the conversation between artificial intelligence and humans interacting with it. you have ideas, right? Those ideas, putting it through the program and then recontextualizing it, I think is more interesting. And I think that's probably a more holistic way in terms of being able to integrate with the technology instead of just homogenizing oneself through the use of the technology, if that makes sense.
And I think it's interesting too, compared to like the world card, right? The world card is incredible in tarot, and it also has the cherubic elements. So, today is the day that my new deck, Be Not Afraid, launches, which is very much about biblically accurate angels. And we talk about the cherubim, and what the cherubic elements are like the 4 cardinal signs of the zodiac. So you have Aquarius, you have Leo, you have Scorpio, you have Taurus, kind of like earth, air, fire, water. And tangentially speaking, from angels, there's like a fine line between angels and demons, bigger line between a demon and a daemon. So Yoshino, in the opening text of the book, talks about the daemon as this kind of metaphysical thought form that comes to help you, that actually is here. And Yoshino, I'll let you expand upon it more, because I think it's been a part of your journey as well. But if we look at is technology a demon that's here to kind of possess us and take us over and take away and kind of trick us with this monkey paw idea? Or is it a daemon in a way that it's here to help elevate and assist us? How can we take metaphysical forces in the thesis that if everything is everything and we're all spirit into form, how do we use it as a tool, not a weapon?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the whole daemon idea, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an expert about that stuff, but from what I understand, the ancient Greeks and Romans thought that creativity existed outside of ourselves. So they would call it the muse, or sometimes they would call it the daemon. And it's essentially this higher versions of oneself, or something that would call you, right? Like the muse. And I think there's something romantic there. And I think that there's something very real there. I think about these Bob Dylan interviews that I listened to before, where he says I can't make that music anymore. And whether you think that's because he's a different version of himself, which is probably true, right? Which is true because we evolve over time. But there's also something romantic there about thinking about this muse or a daemon calling us to reach a higher sense of self. And I think that is a way that I like to view things, at least.
Yeah. And I know we started off this conversation talking about AI as a technology, but I feel like you're also saying there's an ancient technology that can be indescribable and not necessarily put into code. It could be a sort of source code or a divine code that maybe you download as an artist or creative that then outputs through you as a human vessel to create the artwork that you're creating, whether that's writing or photography or painting or whatnot. And so how would you define ancient wisdom as a technology?
I mean, for me, it's like you mentioned, this is something that's kind of flowed through human consciousness, probably from the moment we became self-aware. In our pitch for the deck, we talked about how, since we could, we're painting on caves. We want to find ways to express ourselves. There's this impulse that flows through the human experience to leave an imprint, whether it's through the hand on the wall of a cave painting or the kind of finger painting of the bull you caught, and then all the way up to where technology has advanced, where it's, I want to see the most absurd thing imaginable in the style of X. It came from there. But it's this reservoir of spirit that I think is flowing through us. And it's just part of what makes us so special as a living, breathing animal being, is that we're storytellers and we want to leave behind relics. We want to leave behind those imprints. It's part of our humanity. And it's a very rightful fear of technology stripping away that humanity. But again, I think it's just a greater iteration of that ancient wisdom flowing through, because it's whatever that source code is, finding a new iteration to understand itself through the advancing tech, but also through the consciousness that's working with the advancing tech. And all of this comes back to, even think then, we use technology now with a prompt. Can you help me do X? Can you do this in the style of? But those questions were more simple before technology, where it's how can I express this? Okay, I'm going to take the clay from here and put my hand on the wall, or I'm going to take the stone and chip away at it until I find the beauty within it. That's the sculpture. So these are all prompted by the questions we're asking, which is the fundamental part of being this storytelling animal, is what it means to exist.
Yeah. I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I think taking that as kind of just so what prompts us to create, right? And I think there's something really magical and beautiful there. And whether that's through writing, or whether that's through a photograph, or whether that's through integrating ourselves with the technology, right? There's multiple ways to view it. The sort of like neo-Luddite kind of way where it's like, I don't want anything to do with the advancements of technology, right? But I think that there's something interesting about integrating ourselves in a way where we don't lose our humanity through it. If anything, it can bring further questions. I mean, I literally just started using it like a couple of days ago, but I was like, yeah, this generative fill thing with Photoshop. And I'm like, okay, well, sometimes there's photographs where I want like a very clean background, right? Like there's a central focus. Like I take a lot of portraits of people. There's a central focus, and sometimes those elements are like distracting the background. And it makes it incredibly easy and almost like too easy to erase certain parts of the background or to make the bokeh really like clean, or to make it look like interesting, right? And so I think there's that. And I think also using artificial intelligence as a tool, like I integrate it with some of my photography. I'll put my images through it, through Midjourney or something, and like put 3 or 4 images and see what happens. Because I've been traveling for the past 3 years. It's kind of been my life journey essentially. And I take a lot of photographs, like street photographs and stuff. And there's really interesting results there. Some surrealist abstractions that I probably couldn't have made up on my own. And so I don't know. I guess for me personally, I rather find a way that I can create a voice through these various technologies than to just fully set aside and have sort of like a hatred for it. But although there are certain things ethically that I think are really horrible about like the sourcing of the images too, right? So I think it's more of a conversation than something like where I fall in the side of like, this is a black or white sort of thing. And I think that by having the conversations, we can find more interesting answers, which by talking about the prompt in the beginning, I like the things that we're curious about, we will eventually have more questions through the curiosity of trying to answer those. And maybe we never answer it, but I think that creates more questions. And I think that's what consciousness is trying to find answers to the questions and having more questions, perhaps.
Yeah. So I love that you mentioned cave paintings, Jenn, because that brought me back to this idea of mattering. And I think as a human going through this lifetime of wanting to leave behind something, whether that's leaving behind a legacy for the next generation to encompass in some way. And I think we all want to leave our mark in whatever way that is, or matter in some way, especially as artists, creating artwork for other people to consume, to react from, or positively benefit from in some way. And I think a lot of fear comes from not mattering because of AI, because AI could be taking over some of what their identity is attached to, like their job title or what they're able to produce. And I think what I'm hearing from the both of you is that AI is clearing space for there to be that unlimited potential or a stronger connection to consciousness. Because if you're not doing like the busy tasks that you might be doing without AI, then you could have more time and space to discover what your full potential is.
Completely. And I think, again, it speaks to that it's the witch, not the wand, and like how you use it intentionally. Because for me, I have a big mind and I can weave all these tangential ideas and sometimes can go right out into outer space. But if I am able to say, okay, how can I condense this? How can I edit? How can I find focus? It helps me with that kind of mind. Or I don't have a college education. I graduated high school, I did a little bit of college, and then I just went out into the world. And everything I learned came from a lot of networking, New York nightlife, and just immersing myself around humans. So for me, like helping with grammar or syntax or things like that, that's also great. And that also, I think, open sources that to someone who maybe has big ideas and doesn't know where to begin. There is a level of accessibility to it. But again, if we can engage with it mindfully with the awareness that like human beings are not replaceable. I went down this whole rabbit hole about like effective altruism and rationalism and this whole kind of like really scary realm of thought. And in that kind of realm of thought, humans are kind of like seen as like collateral to get to a greater goal. And I think if we like come back to like, we're not collateral, we're actually the collaborative force to get to that greater goal, is just talking about it, having these conversations and putting it at the forefront and hoping that these masters of technology that are building these systems may have the level of empathy at some point or compassion, or see how we can weave it to create a better world instead of just decimating the world for getting off planet, you know?
Yeah. I love what you just said there, Jenn. that phrase, like it's the witch, not the wand, because I think as long as we're not using these technologies to kind of homogenize thought and homogenize artwork, and if it's something that we can have a conversation about, whether it's with the technology or collectively like we are doing right now, I think that there can be something interesting there. But I think if we utilize it specifically to homogenize things, then I think that's where things can get really not very good for society. So I guess what my question would be is like, how can we use this to understand further? How can you use the technology to have a greater compassion, greater empathy, and greater understanding of humanity?
And I tend to think, and I call it like apocalyptimism, like optimism in the face of the apocalypse. I try to stay optimistic because I think the pendulum always swings. There's the novelty of this new thing. There's this new thing that's taking off further. But then on the other side of the pendulum, I have this feeling, this intuition, this deep instinct that I think part of the thesis of the deck having these creative prompts is that there is going to be more interest to our grit. Like, what is it like to see a pen and ink artwork? What is it like to hold a tactile piece of art in our hands that is like genuinely only human made? That may become even more precious. Once we have like a dead internet where everything is indistinguishable from AI and reality, when you can see something's distinctly human, I think on the other side of the pendulum, there may be a revival of that. That's what I hope for. That is what I truly believe. Like, I think with social media is something that we've seen. It's this great connective tissue that allows us to meet new friends with shared ideas. That I have friends that I've met on social media from a decade ago and I've literally never met in real life. And I'm so grateful for, but I have this connection with that only exists because of this thing. But because this thing has been around for so long and there's this loneliness epidemic, we are craving human connection. So on the other side of this is this great desire to, hey, let's get together in real life. Let's plan a meetup. Let's do, like Yoshino and I actually met at this event in 2017. That was my whole thing. Like, let's get offline and have conversations and meet in person. And it was a great theory and concept, but I always think the pendulum swings both ways. We have this thing that emerges that connects us. It gets to a critical point where it feels toxic. Okay, now let's actually find each other again. This is kind of like the character arc of like the Hunger Games and like every dystopian novel you can imagine, where it's like things get so much that there actually eventually is a return. So I am holding out for the return, and this being a great mirror.
Hey there, mystics! Are you ready to unlock the true potential of your tarot practice? Imagine going beyond basic readings and tapping into the transformative alchemy of tarot, where every card becomes a catalyst for change, growth, and manifestation. That's exactly what you'll discover in the Tarot for Alchemy course. With over 116 lessons designed to unlock your authentic self through tarot, this course will guide you to deeply understand your past so you can make powerful, aligned decisions for your future. This isn't just another tarot class. It's a transformational journey into how tarot can become your ultimate tool for self-discovery, shadow work, and manifestation. In this course, you'll learn how to align with the energy of each card for personal transformation, use tarot for manifestation and decision-making, and develop your unique tarot style to read with confidence. But let's get real. What happens if you don't join? You'll miss out on breakthroughs that could completely shift your life. You'll stay stuck in surface-level readings, leaving untapped potential on the table. And those big dreams you've been working toward, they'll stay just out of reach. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced reader, the Tarot for Alchemy course will take your skills to the next level. Plus, you'll get access to exclusive bonuses, resources, exercises, and a supportive community of like-minded seekers. Don't let another day go by without taking this step for yourself. Visit learntarot.mysticmondays.com to learn more and join today. Now let's get back to this episode.
Speaking of the loneliness epidemic, Yoshino, in the guidebook, you mention building Artist Decoded has taught me solitude cannot nurture growth the way genuine human connections can, drawing us closer to a sense of wholeness. How does that relate to what you're experiencing in your everyday life now in the process of creating this deck?
So I don't think this is a unique thought. I think that growing up as an only child, I kind of thought that the world revolved around me in a sense, right? And I think a lot of us, well, perhaps, I mean, I'll just speak for myself, right? I think that growing up where you're nurtured and I'm an only child, like I felt like I could exist on an island in a sense. Although I needed human connection, I needed that connection. And I sought it a lot because I didn't have it really around me in terms of having like siblings. And so for a while there, I thought, and I think it's a very romantic idea that artists, or not even just artists, but people, I think it's a very like capitalistic idea that like the self-made millionaire or something like that, right? I think it's a very typical idea. But those people, they always have other people helping them. And I think that it's a false notion that we exist on an island when we don't. We need people. We need people to help us. We need that connection. And that's actually what it means to be human, is to feel that connection, to feel love, like not even just romantic love, but like platonic love, all the spectrums of love, to have love for yourself. And I think that by really having that love for yourself, you can find great joy and happiness in that. And I think it took me a long time to get there. And I still think that I'm trying to find even a deeper sense of that as I'm getting older. And I feel grateful to be able to, first of all, to be able to think about that. I think it's a great privilege to be able to think about one's own deepening of one's existence, I guess, consciousness, right? But we need these connections. Like I needed Jenn for this project. Jenn needed me for this project. We needed each other. We learned a lot about each other. We learned good things. We learned bad things. We learned the whole spectrum of like all things. And I like to think that really deepened our friendship. I spent time with her in Mexico with her family, and I felt great joy in that. And there's something beautiful in that. And I think that resonates in the cards in some way. And so perhaps like the initial prompt, that's the last time I'm going to use that as a metaphor or anything. The initial sort of thing was through the artificial intelligence, but it also brought us closer together. And I feel like that was iterated within the whole process. And I feel like the final product, it shows. I think it was an interesting way to get there, but I think it shows.
And I have to add, because I think what's super interesting. So with the other decks that I've worked on with Natalie, she and I are best friends, but we like have seen each other like 4 times in the past, 10 years. And one of the way we work is I draw, and then she'll create a piece of art that expresses how she felt by how I wrote. And ironically, with a deck that has this thesis around technology, Yoshino and I spent a whole ton of time in person together working on this, just sitting at my in-laws' table, pulling cards. I'm a weirdo, so like I like to write in my notebook all my ideas first and then type it out. So we would there was a sense of playfulness and collaboration and togetherness that is just so ironic, because like these other decks that were more like hand-drawn, we never saw each other. We were just collaborating through phone and internet. And then for this project, Yoshino and I spent a lot of time just like playing in real life, talking. Like he mentioned, he was there with me in Mexico, and echoing Yoshino's sentiment. Like I'm also an only child. And when I was living in Mexico, I was very lonely and felt isolated. I just had a baby, and it was a really I thrive around other creative people. So we needed each other, because when he came at that point, it was just this creative breath of fresh air. That was just, I think collaboration is so fun. And we're in this capitalistic competitive thing, but we do as artists that can isolate, as only child artists that can isolate when we're so stuck in an idea or a concept or a thesis. There was this sense of collaborative union and a lot of beauty that came from the play that happened there, which is if you had a behind the scenes edit of this, what some may not realize is how much was tactile, how much was us pulling cards and writing and sitting and talking and being in the same space as each other.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I know we started off talking about AI and the effects of AI and how you used it in the artwork, but also that there is collaboration behind this, and there's also energy felt within the cards. And I think that goes back to the power of intention, of the intent that you put into something, because you're also putting intent into a prompt to generate an answer. And depending on how you phrase the prompt or word it or insert different phrases, or even like, hey, this is like how I say things. Can you also spit it back out and say tapestry or whatever, you know? And I think that's important to note that the energy that we put into something as humans also directs the output of whatever tool that we're using. And so instead of thinking of it as some scary thing that can take over what we can do as humans, it can also be something that is within our control, so to speak.
Completely. And like, as we were working on it, Yoshino is a triple Virgo, Virgo sun, moon, so his attention to detail and intentionality is very specific. And then for me, like I'm an Oracle deck person. Like I started reading Oracle cards when I was like 8 years old because my grandma, I've always used Oracle cards. And while I've loved tarot, I always had kind of a novice level of understanding. So one of the things as we were writing this, I actually was like, I need to educate myself even further beyond the books I have, beyond the experiences I have, beyond the decks I have. And I did an intensive with Naha Armady, who has the school called 22 Teachings. And after I did that, I was like, okay, if we're going to do this, we have to really like get the code. So going through that intensive was also part of it. Like we educated ourselves. We weren't just blindly being like, you know, generate a deck for us. We were like, let's give this as much depth as we can, please.
Yeah, I was actually surprised it was generated by AI because I actually didn't get that when I went through the deck initially. It was just like, oh, this is the way things are going now, I suppose. But yeah, I would love to hear. Yoshino, you were going to say something?
I'm glad that we're doing this conversation. It feels great to be able to speak in the deck in this way. I think for a long time, I thought about the use of generative AI, and it kind of gave me a lot of anxiety about wanting to talk about it. But the more that we talk about it in terms of the entirety of the process, it definitely comes into focus how much intentionality and everything is behind this. It's interesting this time period that we're living in, to where we have these technologies and where it's accessible to a lot of people. And I think some people will use it specifically from the prompt, and I think other people will use it in a way that feels more holistic. And I think that the conversation in itself is what's interesting. And to have these conversations more regularly, I think is interesting as well. So that's all I wanted to say, really.
Yeah, and I also really appreciate Yoshino, you sharing your journey of self-love, it sounds like. And I want to go back to that idea of ancient wisdom as a technology, and if you feel like love is a technology, because perhaps that can boost you to certain levels that, as an abstract idea, is love a technology?
I never thought of it like that, but God, I'm feeling that so much. I'm saying that specifically because, like, how personal do I want to get on this podcast? But I will say this. I've been through a lot of relationships in my life, and I find that the more that you actually love yourself, the closer you can get to finding that other person romantically that will really suit you. And sometimes we have to have grace for ourselves, because we mess up along the way. We're fallible creatures. We're gonna mess up, and that's part of the process of being human. And I think that's what's beautiful. And I think that sometimes, like, our fear of things will teach us a lot about ourselves. And I think that we can either allow that fear to inhibit us from moving forward, or we can allow those fears to inform us. And also, like, my entire adult life, I've been a martial artist. I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 10 years, and I just recently started doing it again, and I've been boxing for about 9 years. And why I'm stating this is because I'm afraid of fighting. I always have been, but I say yes to it, and it makes me a better human being. And I feel like it makes me a more empathetic human being, because I see these professional fighters, and a lot of them are suffering from various things, familial things or divorces or whatever. And it's very relatable. And I think that it's a very interesting thing about this sort of like idea of the modern man and masculinity and things like that. But I think it comes back to love. I think it comes back to loving oneself and being honest about those things, being honest about your fears, being honest about the things you feel guilty about and you're self-conscious about. And I feel like that honesty really, really is empowering. So that's all I want to say about that.
And to your point, like using fighting as a metaphor, what is it but a dance, right? Like you're dancing and weaving and learning the movements of the other person and responding accordingly. I really do think that Buckminster Fuller has this quote that says, love is metaphysical gravity, where it is this thing that provides a tether to the earth that we walk upon, but it becomes this driving force for us to build greater things. So for me, what I love about the Lover's card, and I actually never understood in its entirety until I actually met Arish Khan. He is the lead singer of King Khan and Barbecue's show. He put out the Black Power Tarot, was studied under Jodorowsky. And he explained it to me that it's like, it's not about romantic love. It's about love as the driving collaborative force that you create from. Because when you love and you create, that creative expression is like the utmost beauty. And love is this multifaceted gem where the love I have for my daughter, the love I have for my husband, the love I have for my friends, the varying love I have for my friends, like the relationship I had with Yoshino, where he mentioned like we learned so much about each other through our highest joys, through our being very angry at each other, and then through realizing like, wow, I like genuinely love you as a person. And these are all these different gradients that actually help like refine spirit and what you create from there. And this project, I think, was very meta because it's like decoding many things. But I think love is the greatest magic power. I mean, the heart is the greatest. Talk about the wand. I mean, that's the portal. So yes, love, I think, is the greatest ancient technology that is timeless, and why Interstellar, I think, spoke to so many people too. Because look, you're in this movie about traveling through space and time, and what is the thing that reached him through the fifth dimension was the love he had for his daughter. So love, yeah.
Now I'm reminded by that Interstellar scene. And yeah, I mean, that is the message, isn't it? Is like the love. That's what really connects us. I mean, that's a film about technology very much, right? And I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's like what mattered the most is that love that he felt for his daughter. And I think that goes back to the sort of like, we can't exist on the island. We have to have these connections.
Yeah. So there's this theme of infinite potential within your deck. And this is the last question before we go into the Fast Five. But what is the role of the artist when it comes to creation?
Like, who answers this one? Or both answer it. We should talk simultaneously over each other.
I'll speak to the writer side and you can speak to the artist side. Sound good, Yoshino?
Sure.
So I think, when you look at the magician and it's like as above, so below, how to channel the ineffable and bring it to a practical reality. I think the role of the artist is how to distill something so infinite and vast into something that can be digestible or something that can help me understand my role in the world in a greater way. I think that tarot cards are a great tool to get a glimpse into the tesseract of the future, but really, ultimately, if they can help you be more in the here and now, and the writing allows you to do that, that's really like as above, so below, as within, so without, channeled into form. So that's my TLDR.
Yeah, I like that. Something that I've been thinking about a lot is, well, because it's somewhat recent, I think like a month or two ago when David Lynch passed away. And I was thinking like, what drew people to David Lynch? Because I think the subject matter is very like Francis Bacon-like, but I think there's something very honest about his process. And I can't say that I liked a lot of his films. There's a few films that I really like, but the other ones I'm just like, I don't really get it. And I think that I don't really get it thing is pretty magical and beautiful, because I think when you can truly and honestly express yourself, and speaking about the true, honest expression of oneself, I mean, someone that comes up is just Bruce Lee, David Lynch, David Bowie. Like, you can insert all sorts of artists in that conversation. But the way that they use the mediums to express themselves, I think, is magic. And in the most practical sense, that is what magic is, to be able to see someone using their thoughts and conveying it into some sort of message that resides in a film or on a canvas or in a photo or even in sports. Just seeing someone honestly express oneself is beautiful. That I think that can be achieved through the use of artificial intelligence, as long as you don't just let it spit your words out or let it spit out an image or something. I think that there's something interesting there. And I think that there's further conversations to be had that aren't being had now because we don't even have the technology to really decipher it. What I do know about humans is that when there's something new that can be potentially scary, there's a lot of fear. And what I would like to think is like, what do we do with that fear? What does that fear tell us about ourselves, whether that's through fighting or whether that's through the use of these technologies? And how do we handle that? And how do we evolve from that?
And I think that's the role of art, right? Like, art in its essence is confronting. Art can evoke tears of joy or genuine terror, where you see a photograph where you're actually confronted with the reality of homelessness and you feel it through the lighting and the visceralness of what this human's experience is. And it's like, maybe I never saw the world that way before. Or if you look at a Rothko painting, you're like, I don't get it. Like, feel something. Art is supposed to provoke. And I think that that's also a form of magic where you can express something without words and provoke feeling or rapid awakening of understanding. That is magic. And magic has many degrees.
Yeah, we see so many different people copying directly from like Basquiat or from, I just use Basquiat because I see a lot of artists like directly being influenced and copying from like Basquiat or something, right? The thing is, Basquiat didn't create painting and David Bowie didn't create music. But I think that there's something interesting about remixing all these ideas together. And I think to do it in a way that is the most authentic to you, I think that's also something that's magical.
Yeah. And I know both of you had mentioned something along the lines of consuming art and maybe not getting it. And it just made me think of art transcending logic. And it can affect you in some way, whether maybe it's in a different timeline, maybe a month later it clicks in your subconscious. And I think that can tie back into like the art of tarot, whether you're like, for example, I pulled the Ace of Cups for myself before we hopped on today. And maybe this will click for me once I read the description or, maybe it'll click for me tomorrow or next week or something or next month. Did you want to add something?
Oh, no, I guess I just wanted to say it's like we don't always have to have the answers, but I think we live in a society that wants answers or wants results. But I think it's okay to have the inquiry and to not have the answer and say like, I don't know what this card that I just pulled really means for me specifically right now. I don't know what I just wrote, if that has any significance to something, or maybe it does, maybe it has great significance. And sometimes it's not our job to specifically know why we created the thing or what we're doing while we're creating it or what, but that's for later on down the road. And that's all I want to say. Yeah.
I was just to your point, Grace, like that's the beauty of the cards too. Like for a long time, I was haunted by the Five of Pentacles, just haunted. Every time I pulled a card, I'm like, why am I going to lose everything? Is everything going to go away? Like, why? And then when I kind of finally figured it out, it went away. So sometimes something shows up and again, the questions are sometimes the answers, and sometimes the thing that scares you and that you don't want to confront or look at can have a greater lesson in the unfolding.
Totally. And that's like the divine intelligence of even like divine timing of you could be like, why is this taking so long to happen? And then it happens and maybe it's like not as great as you thought it would be or something. But hey, the universe has answers. Maybe we don't have answers right now and maybe we're not meant to know and maybe that's okay. So let's move into our fast 5 questions. What is your sun, moon, and rising?
Aries sun, Pisces moon, Capricorn rising.
I think I'm Virgo throughout, but I could be mistaken. But I think I'm mostly Virgo.
We have very similar signs, but we're one off, Jen. My rising is Gemini.
Amazing.
Yeah. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Embrace being weird. Don't reject it. Don't feel shame for it. Fully embrace it.
I'll second that. And I'll add, be fearless, have courage, and don't allow other people's secondhand values to obstruct the way that you feel. It's okay to feel. It's okay to have questions, but have courage.
How would you define everyday magic?
I would define it from kind of the typical understanding of it's the art and science of using your will to transform your reality. So willpower is the greatest tool to create the world that you wish to see.
I like that. I think something that resonates with me is the idea that destiny is carved by our decisions. And I also think that a practical use of magic is that you can be of a lot of service to other people. Like you can really have an effect on other people's lives in a very positive way by the way that you treat other people and to have kindness towards other people. I think that's the most practical way that you can influence others.
What are your favorite rituals?
For me, I have 3 favorites. I love candle magic. That to me, it's this combination of tactile, meditative, intention. I really love that. Pulling cards from my grandmother's oracle deck, which I've had since I was 8. And I only recently found out where it came from. And writing in a notebook. I have so many notebooks that are just filled with scribblings and writings. And I think that that's a beautiful ritual of having this kind of tangible artifact of your thoughts.
Yeah, I like that. Well, my biggest ritual for my mental health is working out. That's the thing that I cannot live without. My second ritual would probably be cooking for myself, I guess. It's like very practical stuff. And I really, in the mornings, I like to organize my thoughts in my mind, whether that's through writing or whether that's through figuring out specifically what I need to do that day, or even doing that the night before, but organizing my thoughts in a way that makes sense to me.
Totally helps to win the day with a checklist. And it's very Virgo.
Very Virgo. Triple Virgo.
Check, check, check.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to in the near future?
For me, I'm very, very excited that Be Not Afraid next deck has launched today. I think that considering the state of the world right now, having a message of fearlessness in the face of it all is really prescient. So I look forward to kind of the intention that I'm wrapping around how I want to talk about it. It's called like Hope Core. So offering just any bit of light and hope in the face of this chaos. I'm very excited to be a beacon for that.
Congratulations on your new deck.
Thank you.
Yeah, congrats, Jen. That's amazing. I don't know. I don't want to be too cheesy, but just like being appreciative of things, being grateful, just to be able to like express oneself, to give to others, to have life, to give to other people's lives. I think it's as simple as that. Be able to continue to create. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful and ties back into this macro theme of the world where these micro things matter that make up all the macro things, whether it's like the small things of giving thanks or being grateful or being present, and power is in presence because you can't actually make decisions if you're not present. So yeah, that's really awesome. We're going to move into our collective reading from Jenn. She's going to use the Artist Decoded Tarot and perhaps also a guest pull from your new deck today.
Yes, I wanted to be prepared. So I have been shuffling and I just have to share, it's very funny what cards I got. So I just did a 3-card pull from Artist Decoded. And the first card that I got was Strength, which feels very, very apropos. The second card is Queen of Wands. And the third card is 7 of Cups. So as a 3-card reading, it feels like a very perfect amalgam of this conversation is finding strength in the face of the beast and learning how to temper it with heart and gentleness, knowing that it's the witch, not the wand, even though this is the Queen of Wands, using how to control your mental force and direct that fire into something big, and seeing that options that you have in front of you, the dreams and what dreams may come. And I have to share, it's very funny because the card I pulled from Be Not Afraid is Shamuel, who in our deck is about using love as a metaphysical force to fix what's been broken, to put the pieces back together, and to have trust in the new chapter unfolding. And look at these two compared to each other. You have an angel next to their feline companion, and then we have Strength with the lion. So it's kind of like channeling our humanity and that animal force to pick up the pieces and rebuild anew.
Wow, that's so cool.
Wow, it's super beautiful, Jen. I felt like I needed to hear that today. Thank you.
You're welcome. But I was just laughing at the synchronicity. And it's 11:11 here. So, of course.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing your light and wisdom and for opening up a door into your insights and, sharing your process as well, because I think a lot of people are curious behind how they can get in touch with their artistry and spirituality, and also this kind of like newish topic of integrating creativity, technology, and spirituality together. So I really appreciate you both for being here and for sharing yourselves today. So thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you for offering this space for us. This has been lovely.
Yeah, thank you so much. We both really appreciate you for the time and for everything. Thank you very much.
Thanks. All right, bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode with Jennifer Sodini and Grant Yoshino. This conversation was truly expansive, blending art, spirituality, and cosmic connection into one beautiful whole. This collaboration is such a reflection of the World Tarot card: integration, unity, and completion. Here's a journaling prompt to take with you. Where in your life are you coming full circle? What have you learned on your journey so far? I'd love to hear how this resonated. Drop a comment, leave a review, or share with someone who's on their path of becoming their complete whole selves. And as a reminder, we will be doing a giveaway of Jennifer Sodini and Grant Yoshino's The Artist Decoded Tarot over on Instagram, YouTube, and all of the socials, so make sure to check that out. Until next time, celebrate the wholeness that already exists within you. Sending you grace today and every day.